So I'm smoking I'm enjoying the sunshine. I know the exposure must be kind of wonky, but the sun just feels so good. Kind of chilly out there and windy, but it's sunny and nice. Smoking some Balkan Supreme in a Ukrainian pearwood pipe. So this is a Mr. Brog, a number 52. Hopefully Mr. Brog continues to be able to do what he does best through all of the conflict going on over there. So all this Ukrainian business kind of brought up for me, I actually have some roots in that part of the world. So my aunt, who lives in Nebraska, delightful person. I need to hop on an airplane and go out and see her too. But she, some years ago, compiled this amazing volume, A Noose Family History. I mean, the thing is just like, I refer to it as the Bible. So this is kind of a history of this one part of my family. And you have to remember this, all of our families are made up of mom and dad, right? Who made you. And that is just, so then that branches off, and then there's mom's family, which is her mom and dad, your dad's family, which is his mom and dad. So it gets to be very complex very quickly, and that's what this is all about, is to try and document some of that. So this was the coming of the Frederick Noose family to Sutton, Nebraska. Facts furnished by Christian Noose Sr., written and given on a program by Mrs. R.F. Grosshands in 1937. I tell you. So, the oldest member of the group here today, Uncle Christian, will be 90 years old in December. 1937, I presume. He was a young man, 28 years old, when he came to America with his parents, Frederick Noose and Magdalena Remick. They had two small children, Christian Noose Jr. in your midst today, and Margaret, who is Mrs. Jacob Noose of Lodi, California. These Nooses were the third group to come to this vicinity from southern Russia, where they and their fathers were prosperous farmers. Years before, they had migrated from Germany when Russia was open to Germans for homesteading. The ruler of Russia at the time was Catherine III, herself German, and she promised them religious and educational freedom besides exemption from military service, which was compulsory in Germany. So she, from the accounts I heard, she said, "Hey, you Germans, you're great farmers. You're never going to own land in Germany. You'll essentially be serfs. Come on over here to Russia. We have this big grassland area called the steppe that we need to put under cultivation and start making it productive. And so what I offer to you Germans, German farmers, is land, the ability to continue speaking German, which was Low German, is considered Low German now, religious freedom, and no conscription into the Russian army. So those were big deals. They could have their own schools, their own communities, German speaking, and the deal was that they would provide the labor to break the steppe and put it under cultivation. So That's kind of the background. Our great-grandparents Jacob and Catherine Noose were brought to Russia as tiny children about 1800. Auctioneers, Grieses, and Großhanses migrated from Germany into Russia during the years 1805 to 1817. Great-grandfather Nicholas Auctioner walked into Russia when he was 15 years old. He was a sheep herder and became skillful in setting lamb's bones with splints and turpentine. For 70 years or more, the Germans lived in Russia, enjoying the freedom and security offered them by Catherine III. But when Alexander II came into power, a law was passed making military service compulsory for these Germans, who were a peace-loving people. But this law was not to go into effect for 10 years. During these 10 years, they were allowed to leave the country if they wished, without making application for permission. Rather than have the young men take up arms, they decided to make a great sacrifice, to leave their possessions, as well as their aged parents, and come to America, the land of the free. The first to make the break were Henry and Michael Grease, Johann Großhans, and Henry Hoffman families. They came in 1873, about 55 families. In 1874 came another much larger group, auctioneers, Schwartzes, and others. Among them were Henry Grease and family. Then in 1875, the Frederick Noose family, who had been hearing good reports from the earlier immigrants, left their homes in Rohrbach on the steppes near Odessa on the Black Sea, and started off to the new country. With them came John Rath and family and Adam Troutman. They left Rohrbach, Russia on May 15th, bidding farewell to brothers and sisters and aged parents. Both their great-grandfathers, excuse me, sorry. Let's see, I have a little tea here. Both great-grandfathers were then 75 years old, so they traveled at age 75. Wow. I think these people were pretty tough. They went through Austria and Germany, embarked at Hamburg, and traveled on the ship 14 days. They traveled third class, which of course meant no convenience at all. They carried with them some food, such as toasted bread and cured ham. On the ship, food was lowered to them in buckets. Each family grouped itself around their bucket and took out in their dishes what they wanted to eat. They disliked the taste of the food so much that they threw most of it overboard. During the day, they had to go up on deck while sleeping quarters were fumigated. You can imagine how they liked this when they were all seasick. Grandfather stood the trip the best. He claimed it was because he smoked a pipe. Finally, after landing in New York and after passing inspection, they headed westward. In Chicago, they changed trains, the buses being hay racks. At Burlington, Iowa, they were warned that the grasshoppers would eat them if they came out to Nebraska. However, since the Nooses had set Sutton as their destination, they continued on through Plattsmouth, which at that time boasted a small hotel but no depot. Other immigrants who had come with them from Russia left them here for Dakota, where they were able to homestead 320 acres instead of 160 acres, as in Nebraska. Lincoln was the next stop. Just as their train pulled in, the westbound train was ready to pull out. They spied grandfather Johann Großhans, who was an agent for the railroad land. Through his influence, the train waited while he helped the new arrivals purchase tickets to Sutton. No doubt the transfer from one train to the other was made with more joy and greater haste than any previous ones. Each member was responsible for lugging a portion of the baggage assigned him when they left home. It may have been the Brotsack, pillows, the pelts, fur coats, bag of feathers, roll of bedding, bundle of clothes, or one of the little nooses. The money was also divided, the men carrying theirs in leather belts worn next to the body, and the women theirs concealed in pockets of their full skirts or next to the bosom. On June 22, 1875, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Noose clan arrived in Sutton. They numbered 14. Imagine their joy upon their arrival here, being greeted by friends and relatives who were anxiously waiting for them. Some of them stayed with the Grosshanses in town, and others with the Johann Grieses near Lushton. The Christian Noose family lived with Mr. and Mrs. William Griese north of Sutton until they had a home. This they purchased from an early homesteader who had been discouraged by the grasshopper plague. For 3 years, the hoppers had been so bad that during the middle of the day the sky was entirely darkened. Thus, Uncle Christian became the proud owner of the homestead now farmed by Elmer Noose. With the farm went machinery, livestock, even a flock of turkeys. Later he homesteaded 60 acres, the limit allowed those who were not Civil War veterans. At the same time he filed his first naturalization papers for American citizenship, which he completed as soon as eligible. Grandfather Noose, hearing of his son's success, scouted around and succeeded in buying out another homesteader about 2 miles north. The pieces where Jake Troutman and Vera and Arthur Auctioner live now. In this home, Grandfather and Grandmother Noose lived with their children, enduring the hardships of the early pioneer years and later enjoying the blessings of the more bountiful harvest. One by one, the sons and daughters were married and established homes of their own. Grandmother passed on to her reward in 1886 and grandfather in 1888. The direct descendants of Frederick Noose now number 188, certainly more than that now, because this was written 20 years ago. The majority still live in Nebraska, but many have sought greener fields. You will find them in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Colorado, Idaho, Washington, D.C., and California. So that was... I'm going to have to look up Rohrbach, see if it's still there. But definite roots in Ukraine, just north of Odessa, which is under siege right now. So, yeah. But, going through all this history just reminds me, these people who say, oh, America is for Americans. Well, America is made up of immigrants, and that's just the undeniable truth. I'm sorry, there's no fake news about it. So those are our roots. Those are the roots of America. And a shining light for people to come to and make a better life. That's my vision of America. So I know that that isn't the vision for a lot of folks, but not even a lot of folks, for some folks. So, but going back through the family histories and so forth just makes me realize how quickly the numbers of children and the constellation of people that you're related to becomes huge, and so the interrelationships are so important, as they were when these people immigrated here, and they were helped by folks who had come in earlier waves of immigration. And a lot of there was homesteading, of course, but there was also railroad land grant stuff where every other section was given to the railroads to sell to help pay for their investment in putting tracks across the land. So all of that conspired to bring people here, much in the Midwest, in Nebraska and the Dakotas, much as it had been in Russia under Catherine, where these were talented farmers and they were encouraged to immigrate to put the land into productive use. So I'm proud of that, and wow, strong people. So, so that's on one side of my mom's family, these Germans from Russia. The other side is Scottish and English. Excuse me. Gosh, I don't know. And then on my dad's side, it's English and Irish, and so we're just this mix, this mutt mix of nationalities, and it's such a great thing, you know. Nobody's a purebred, so that's the reality, and I think that's the American truth and the American dream, and I hope that continues, because it's a great thing. So I'm going to smoke my Ukrainian pear pipe. And think about my progenitors and admire their pluck and their courage and their determination. So I was just looking through the book here. There's a little thing on the German immigration to South Russia. Interesting stuff. In 1763, Catherine II, a former German princess of Anhalt-Zerbst, was Empress of Russia. Catherine II had in her possession large tracts of virgin land along the lower course of the Volga River in Russia. She set out to turn this region into productive agricultural land and to populate the area as a protective barrier against the nomadic Asiatic tribes who inhabited the region. On July 22, 1763, Catherine issued a manifesto inviting foreigners to settle in the vast uncultivated lands of Russia. To encourage immigration to Russia, the manifesto offered certain rights and privileges to incoming foreign settlers and to their descendants forever. The rights and privileges as laid out in the manifesto: free transportation to Russia, the right to settle in segregated colonies, free land and the necessary tax-free loans to establish themselves, religious freedom and the right to build their own churches. Implied in this was the right to establish their own schools, local self-government, exemption from military or civil service, and the right to leave Russia at any time. The manifesto offered a chance for a better life, and many thousands of people immigrated to Russia from Germany and areas of Central Europe. Many German people took up this Russian offer. The 7-Year War had just ended in 1763. Whole regions in Germany lay devastated and poverty was widespread. Many Germans immigrated to other lands, including the New World, in order to make a new start in life. The first German-speaking colonists who responded to Catherine's manifesto were directed to lands along the Volga River in the years 1764 to 1767. Later, as Russia acquired the Ukrainian lands north of the Black Sea, the Crimean Peninsula, and Bessarabia from Turkey, colonists were invited to settle in those areas. These later immigrations occurred 40 to 50 years after the Great Volga Immigration. The Black Sea Germans responded to an invitation that was issued in 1803 by Alexander I, the grandson of Catherine. So many responded to the Tsar's invitation, the Russian crown feared that unsuitable immigrants might enter Russia. Accordingly, in 1804, a restrictive decree was issued that embodied the generous terms of Catherine II, but required that all future immigrants must possess cash or goods worth at least 300 guilders, be skilled in farming or handicrafts, and be people with families. No single fortune hunters were desired. The colonists of 1804 to 1818 had either a long and difficult overland journey or had to travel by river barge down the Danube. Immigrants from 1804 to 1812 could not use the Danube River because of the Russo-Turkish War, which took place from 1806 to 1812. The travelers to Russia in 1817 went by boat down the Danube and due to inexperience, thousands died of disease and exposure. The German immigrants started schools and churches that provided instruction in their native German language. Life was generally good for the colonists, and they maintained the distinct customs, dress, musical tastes, and dialects of their ancestral homelands. So here's a little map of the German colonies in the Ukraine. I know. So with Odessa kind of front and center. The village of Rohrbach. Yes. Okay. In 1871, Tsar Alexander II revoked the preferential rights and privileges given to the colonist settlers by the manifestos of Catherine II and Alexander I. The colonists were reduced to the level of Russian peasants and were under the same laws and obligations. In 1874, the colonists' sons were drafted into the Tsar's army for the first time. The colonists were dismayed and angry, feeling that the Russian crown was guilty of a breach of contract. As there was nothing they could do, their thoughts turned toward leaving Russia. To return to Germany did not enter their minds, for when their ancestors had left Germany years before, they had no intention ever to return to their native country. During the summer of 1872, Ludwig Bethge, a former colonist who had led a party of 83 friends from the Black Sea to the United States in 1849, visited relatives and friends in the Black Sea colonies. Noting the unrest and dissatisfaction among the colonists, he bestowed the virtues of the United States upon them, urging immigration there. Shortly after his return to the United States, an immigration movement to the United States, Canada, and South America was set in motion, which continued more or less unabatedly until the outbreak of World War I. Alexander III came to the throne of Russia in 1881 after his father, Alexander II, had been assassinated. Russification became the official policy. Classes had to be taught in the Russian language, and business was required to be transacted only in Russian. It became increasingly difficult for the German-speaking colonists in Russia to purchase land necessary for their expanding numbers. All of the rights of self-government in their villages were lost under the changed conditions. Hesitating to make the long journey over the ocean, many colonists decided to stay in Russia in spite of the Russification policy. In actual number, perhaps more of the German colonists remained in Russia than immigrated to the countries of North and South America. Because of requirements under the U.S. Homestead Act of 1862, the German Russians who homesteaded in the United States were required to live on their 160-acre farms. They could not live in villages or colonies as they had in Russia. Many Volga Germans settled in cities in the Middle West of the United States, while the Black Sea Germans acquired land and homesteaded in Nebraska, Kansas, and the Dakotas. Others settled in western Canada by purchase and homesteading. The Volga Germans became closely associated with the sugar beet industry in Colorado and western Nebraska, while most Black Sea Germans became wheat growers in the Dakotas and in Canada. Some later became orchard and grape growers in California. Today, descendants of those early Germans from Russia are now living in Colorado, California, Kansas, Nebraska, Michigan, Illinois, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Washington, as well as Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan in western Canada. Some also immigrated from Russia to South America. It just goes on and on. Interesting stuff, I think, and appropriate to be aware of during this time of conflict in Ukraine. And Ukraine has always historically been a place where Europe meets Asia, basically. I mean, so, yeah, waves of immigration and all kinds of stuff going on. So, it's interesting. But I think it's good to know what your roots are. You know, it helps you appreciate where you are, who you are, and who you might be connected to. So.